In 2013, a Colorado cold case was finally solved when an arrest shocked the entire community. On February 4th, 21-year-old Kelsie Schelling drove 2 hours from Denver to Pueblo with life-changing news she was 8 weeks pregnant. She went to meet her boyfriend, Donthe Lucas, at St. Mary-Corwin Hospital. Surveillance cameras captured her car in the parking lot, but she never walked through those hospital doors. Hours later, her Chevrolet Cruze sat empty in a Walmart parking lot. Kelsie had vanished without a trace. For 4 long years, her family searched highways and rivers while investigators followed dead-end leads across Colorado. Then, in 2017, authorities arrested Lucas for first-degree murder. But as the shocking trial unfolded in 2021, one haunting question remained unanswered, a question that still torments her grieving family today. If Donthe Lucas truly killed Kelsie Schelling and her unborn child, then where did he hide her body? Before we get into the story, drop a comment with your country and the time right now. The screen of Kelsie Schelling's phone glowed in the pre-dawn darkness of her Denver apartment. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, typing and retyping the message that would change everything. The words felt too big, too important for a simple text. But this news couldn't wait another day. "Hey babe, I'm pregnant. We need to talk." She hit send at 6:47 a.m. on the 4th of February 2013. Within minutes, her phone buzzed back. Donthe Lucas wanted to see her. Today, in Pueblo. Kelsie stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 21, she still had the round cheeks of youth, but her eyes held a woman's determination. 8 weeks pregnant, she pressed her hand against her flat stomach, imagining the life growing inside. This baby would be loved, wanted, protected. She packed light, just an overnight bag with a change of clothes and her phone charger. The 2-hour drive from Denver to Pueblo stretched ahead like a bridge between her old life and whatever came next. Donthe had sounded different on the phone, distant. But maybe that was shock. Maybe once they talked face-to-face, once they made plans, everything would be okay. The Chevrolet Cruze started on the first try despite the February cold. Frost clung to the windshield like delicate lace, and she scraped it away with careful strokes. The morning was clear, promising sunshine later. A good day for new beginnings. As she pulled onto Interstate 25 South, Kelsie's phone sat in the cup holder, connected to the car charger. She had promised to text when she arrived. Her mother, Laura Saxton, worried when Kelsie made this drive alone. But today felt different. Today, she wasn't alone anymore. The highway unwound before her, past sleeping suburbs and snow-dusted fields. Other cars moved like shadows in the early light, commuters heading to work, truckers pushing toward their destination, normal people living normal lives. Soon, she would tell them all. Soon, everyone would know about the baby. Mile by mile, the landscape changed from Denver's urban sprawl to the rolling plains that surrounded Pueblo. Kelsie sang along to the radio, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on her stomach. She had always wanted to be a mother. Now it was happening. The text came at 9:23 a.m., just as she reached Pueblo's city limits. "Meet me at the hospital," Donthe wrote. "Street Mary-Corwin. I'll explain everything when you get here." Street Mary-Corwin Medical Center rose from the Pueblo landscape like a beacon of hope. Its beige walls and modern architecture promised healing, new life, answers to prayers. Kelsie pulled into the parking lot at 10:15 a.m., her Cruze crunching over patches of ice and gravel. She sat in the car for a moment, engine running, heater blowing warm air across her hands. Through the windshield, she could see the hospital's main entrance. Automatic doors opened and closed as people came and went. Visitors carrying flowers, medical staff in scrubs, families supporting each other through whatever crisis had brought them here. The security camera mounted on a tall pole captured everything. Later, investigators would study that footage frame by frame, watching Kelsie's silver Cruze enter the lot, park in space 47, sit motionless for exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. They would see her silhouette behind the wheel, phone pressed to her ear. But they would never see her walk through those hospital doors. Kelsie's phone buzzed. Another text from Donthe. "Change of plans. Don't go inside. I'll come to you." She frowned at the message. Why the sudden change? Was he already here? She scanned the parking lot but didn't see his truck. A few other vehicles sat scattered across the asphalt, a red pickup truck near the emergency room entrance, a white sedan by the main doors, an older Honda Civic closer to the street. The February wind rocked her car gently. She turned up the radio and waited, watching the entrance for any sign of Donthe. Her phone showed 10:22 a.m. He was always running late, but this felt different, urgent. A knock on her passenger window made her jump. Donthe stood outside, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, breath visible in the cold air. His face was hard to read through the frost-edged glass, but he wasn't smiling. Kelsie unlocked the doors and he slid into the passenger seat. The familiar smell of his cologne filled the car, woodsy, masculine, comforting. For a moment, everything felt normal again. "Why didn't you want me to go inside?" she asked. Donthe buckled his seatbelt without looking at her. "Just drive," he said. "We need to go somewhere private to talk." The security camera watched them leave the hospital parking lot at 10:31 a.m. Kelsie's Cruze turned right onto the main road, disappearing into Pueblo's maze of streets and strip mall. The footage would become evidence, replayed countless times in courtrooms and late-night investigations. But in that moment, it was just two young people driving away to discuss their future. The Walmart Supercenter on North Elizabeth Street bustled with Monday morning shoppers. Retirees compared prices on cereal, mothers pushed strollers through wide aisles, and employees restocked shelves for the busy week ahead. In the vast parking lot, hundreds of cars came and went in the endless dance of American commerce. At 11:47 a.m., Kelsie's silver Chevrolet Cruze pulled into a space near the garden center. The car sat for several minutes, engine running, two figures visible inside. Through the windshield, passers-by might have seen what looked like an intense conversation, animated gestures, leaning close together, the kind of serious discussion that young couples have when life gets complicated. Then the passenger door opened and Donthe Lucas stepped out. Security cameras captured him walking around to the driver's side. The exchange was brief, a few words through the open window, maybe a quick kiss goodbye. Then he was walking toward his own vehicle, parked several rows away, while Kelsie's car remained motionless in its space. At 12:03 p.m., Donthe's truck left the parking lot. Kelsie's Cruze stayed behind. Hours passed. Shoppers flowed around the abandoned car like water around a stone. An elderly man collected shopping carts nearby, his orange safety vest bright against the gray pavement. A young mother struggled to load groceries into her minivan while two toddlers clamored for her attention. A teenager practiced parallel parking with his nervous instructor. None of them noticed the silver car that never moved. Inside the Walmart, employees began their afternoon routines. The pharmacy filled prescriptions for regular customers. The deli sliced meats and cheeses for lunch orders. Customer service handled returns and complaints with practiced efficiency. Life continued in its ordinary patterns while something extraordinary was happening just outside. By 3 p.m., the car had been sitting in the same spot for over 3 hours. A security guard named Miguel Hernandez made his rounds through the parking lot, checking for shopping cart clusters and monitoring for any suspicious activity. The silver Cruze caught his attention not because it seemed dangerous, but because it hadn't moved in his entire shift. He walked closer and peered through the windows. Empty. No keys in the ignition. No driver. Just an abandoned car in a sea of abandoned cars, waiting for someone who would never return. Laura Saxton checked her phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The kitchen clock read 8:47 p.m., and she hadn't heard from Kelsie since that morning. Her daughter was usually good about staying in touch, especially when she was driving to Pueblo to see Donthe. The 2-hour trip always made Laura nervous. She tried calling again, straight to voicemail. "Hi. You've reached Kelsie. I can't answer right now, but leave me a message and I'll call you back." The cheerful recording felt like a punch to the stomach. Laura hung up without leaving another message. She had already left 3. In the living room, the television droned with Monday night programming. Laugh tracks and commercials for cleaning products filled the silence that Kelsie's absence had created. Laura paced between the kitchen and the front window, watching for headlights that never came. She called Donthe's number. It rang twice before going to voicemail. His greeting was shorter, less friendly than Kelsie's. Laura didn't trust Donthe Lucas, had never trusted him. Something about his smooth answers and calculated charm made her skin crawl. But Kelsie was 21, an adult capable of making her own choices, even when those choices worried her mother to death. The phone rang at 9:15 p.m. Laura lunged for it, hoping to see Kelsie's name on the caller ID. Instead, it was her sister checking about dinner plans for the weekend. Laura barely managed polite conversation before hanging up. By 10 p.m., worry had crystallized into fear. Kelsie should have been home hours ago. Even if she had decided to stay overnight in Pueblo, which she sometimes did, she would have called. She always called. Laura tried Donthe's number again. This time, it went straight to voicemail without ringing. Either his phone was dead or he was ignoring her calls. The house felt too quiet, too empty. Laura walked through Kelsie's bedroom, touching familiar objects, the stuffed animals from childhood, textbooks from college, the framed photo of mother and daughter at graduation. Everything waited for Kelsie to come home. At 11:30 p.m., Laura called the Pueblo Police Department. "I'd like to report a missing person," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "My daughter was supposed to come home tonight, and I can't reach her." Detective Ryan Sokolsky had seen enough missing person cases to know the statistics by heart. Most adults who disappear come home within 24 hours. They're staying with friends, sleeping off a bad decision, or avoiding responsibilities. The worried families almost always get their happy endings. So, But sometimes they don't. Kelsie Schelling's case landed on his desk Tuesday morning with a stack of preliminary reports. 21-year-old female, last seen leaving for Pueblo Monday morning, supposed to return Monday night. Boyfriend claims he never saw her, phone going straight to voicemail. The surveillance footage from Street Mary-Corwin Hospital told a different story. Sokolsky watched the video on his computer screen, studying every frame. There was Kelsie's silver Cruze entering the parking lot at 10:15 a.m. There was a male figure approaching the passenger side at 10:23 a.m. There were both of them leaving together at 10:31 a.m. He paused the video and enlarged the image. The male figure was tall, thin, wearing a dark jacket. His face was partially obscured by the car's roof, but the build matched Donthe Lucas's description. Sokolsky picked up his phone and dialed Lucas's number. It rang once before a young man's voice answered, "Yeah? This is Detective Sokolsky with the Pueblo Police Department. I'm calling about Kelsie Schelling. I understand you were supposed to meet her yesterday?" A pause. "Yeah, we were supposed to meet, but she never showed up. I waited around for like an hour and then left." "Where did you wait for her?" "At the hospital, Street Mary-Corwin. She said she wanted to meet there." Sokolsky looked at the frozen image on his screen. Donthe Lucas getting into Kelsie's car. "Mr. Lucas, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for an interview. Would you be available this afternoon?" "I guess. Am I in trouble or something?" "Just routine questions. We're trying to locate Kelsie and understand her movements yesterday." After hanging up, Sokolsky made another call, this time to the tech department. "I need all available surveillance footage from the Walmart on North Elizabeth Street, Monday, February 4th, between 11 a.m. and 6:00 p.m. The evidence was building before he even knew what crime he was investigating. Kelsie's Chevrolet Cruze sat in the impound lot, like evidence of a life interrupted. Detective Sokolsky walked around the vehicle, noting details that the crime scene photographer had already documented. No visible damage, doors unlocked, keys missing. Inside, Kelsie's world remained frozen in time. A half-empty water bottle in the cup holder, loose change in the center console, a parking stub from Denver International Airport, dated 3 weeks earlier. Her phone charger snaked across the passenger seat, waiting for a phone that would never return. The forensics team had already processed the car for fingerprints, DNA, and any other physical evidence. They found Kelsie's prints throughout the vehicle, as expected. They also found Donthe Lucas's prints on the door handles, gear shift, and radio controls. But it was what they found in the trunk that made Sokolsky's stomach clench. A small suitcase, packed with clothes for an overnight trip. Maternity vitamins, still in their original packaging, hidden in a side pocket. A pregnancy test with 2 pink lines, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. She had been planning to tell him. The evidence painted a clear picture, a young woman driving to share life-changing news with her boyfriend, carrying proof of their shared future in her overnight bag. Now the car sat empty while somewhere in Pueblo, Donthe Lucas was using Kelsie's ATM card. Bank records showed 3 withdrawals since Monday afternoon. Tuesday at 2:17 p.m., $100 from a machine near the Walmart where her car was found. Tuesday at 8:45 p.m., another $100 from a downtown location. Wednesday morning at 9:23 a.m., $60 from a gas station on the south side of town. Each transaction required Kelsie's 4-digit PIN code. Sokolsky had interviewed enough suspects to recognize deception, and Donthe Lucas radiated lies like heat from asphalt. His story kept changing. First, he never saw Kelsie. Then he saw her briefly, but she seemed upset. Then she had given him permission to use her car while she stayed with friends. "Which friends?" Sokolsky had asked. "I don't remember their names." "Where do they live?" "Somewhere on the west side, I think." "You think?" Lucas had shrugged, looking everywhere except at the detective's eyes. "She didn't tell me the details. The video evidence said otherwise." Whatever happened between 10:31 a.m. when they left the hospital together and 12:03 p.m. when Lucas left the Walmart alone, Kelsie Schelling had vanished. Dawn broke over Pueblo with the kind of crisp clarity that made searching easier. Visibility stretched for miles across the plains, and the February air carried sounds further than usual. It was the kind of morning that gave search teams hope. 57 volunteers gathered in the parking lot of Sunset Park at 7 a.m., their breath visible in the cold air. They came from all walks of life: retirees with time to spare, college students skipping classes, parents who couldn't imagine losing their own children. Laura Saxton stood among them, passing out flyers with Kelsie's smiling face. "She's 5'6", 120 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes," Laura told each group. "She was wearing a red winter coat when she left Denver. Please look everywhere under bridges, in abandoned buildings, anywhere someone might." She couldn't finish the sentence. The volunteers understood. K-9 units from 3 different departments spread across the search grid. German shepherds and bloodhounds pressed their noses to the ground, following scent trails that led nowhere. The dogs were good, some of the best in Colorado, but they needed starting points. Without knowing where Kelsie had gone after leaving the Walmart, the search area sprawled across hundreds of square miles. Helicopters thumped overhead, their pilots scanning the Arkansas River and the countless irrigation ditches that crisscrossed Pueblo County. From the air, the landscape looked like a patchwork quilt: brown fields, silver waterways, clusters of buildings connected by straight roads. Perfect country for hiding something you never wanted found. The volunteer searchers moved in careful lines across fields and through stands of cottonwood trees. They checked culverts, abandoned farmhouses, and anywhere a person might seek shelter. Their calls echoed across the empty spaces. "Kelsie! Kelsie!" But only the wind answered back. By afternoon, the search had covered 12 square miles. They found a rusted bicycle frame, 3 old tires, someone's lost wallet from 1987, and the remains of a campsite used by transients, but no sign of Kelsie Schelling. As sunset painted the sky orange and purple, the volunteers gathered back at the park. Tired faces reflected the day's disappointment, but also determination to continue. Laura thanked them all, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "We'll search again tomorrow," she promised. And the day after that, however long it takes. The flyers with Kelsie's picture spread across Colorado like seeds in the wind. The file folder grew thicker each week, but Detective Sokolsky felt no closer to answers. Phone records, bank statements, surveillance footage, witness interviews, all the pieces of a puzzle that refused to come together. 6 months after Kelsie Schelling's disappearance, the case had officially gone cold. The press conference room at Pueblo Police Headquarters, filled with local media and a few national reporters drawn by the story's tragic elements. Young woman, pregnancy, vanished without a trace. It had all the ingredients that kept viewers watching through commercial breaks. Chief Luis Velez stepped to the podium, his gray uniform crisp despite the weight of delivering bad news. Behind him, a poster-sized photo of Kelsie smiled at the cameras, the same image that had appeared on thousands of flyers and dozens of billboards across Colorado. 6 months ago, Kelsie Schelling disappeared in our city, the chief began. Despite exhaustive searches and investigation, we have been unable to locate her or determine exactly what happened on February 4th. Today, we are announcing a $50,000 reward for information leading to the location of Kelsie or the arrest of anyone responsible for her disappearance. Questions came from the reporters like gunfire. Was there a suspect? Had the boyfriend been cleared? What about the surveillance footage? Were there any new leads? Detective Sokolsky answered what he could without compromising the investigation. Yes, they had a person of interest. No, they couldn't discuss details about evidence. Yes, they believed someone in the community had information that could help solve the case. What he didn't say was that the person of interest was walking free while Kelsie remained missing. The evidence against Donthe Lucas was circumstantial, compelling to investigators, but not strong enough for prosecutors to file charges. They needed more. In the audience, Laura Saxton sat in the front row, flanked by family members and victim advocates. She had aged years in the past 6 months, her face carved with worry lines that hadn't existed before February 4th. When the chief finished his statement, she stepped to the microphone. "Someone knows where my daughter is," Laura said, her voice carrying the authority of absolute conviction. "Someone knows what happened to Kelsie and her baby. I'm asking you, please help us bring her home." The cameras captured every word, every tear, every moment of a mother's pain. The case was cold, but the search for truth would never stop. 3 years felt like a lifetime and an instant. Laura Saxton stood in the same spot where she had organized that first search party, but everything had changed. The faces around her were different now. Some volunteers had moved away, others had found new causes, and a few had simply grown tired of looking for someone who might never be found. But Laura hadn't given up. She couldn't. The annual memorial vigil for Kelsie drew about 40 people to Sunset Park on the 4th of February 2016. Candles flickered in the evening wind, their small flames defiant against the darkness. Someone had brought an acoustic guitar and played soft melodies while people shared memories and prayers. Kelsie's picture sat propped against a tree, surrounded by flowers that would freeze before morning. The same radiant smile that had launched 1,000 searches now presided over this gathering of the faithful. Those who still believed that answers would come, that justice would prevail, that lost daughters could somehow find their way home. Kelsie would be 24 today, Laura told the crowd. She would be planning her future, maybe finishing college, maybe starting a career, and somewhere I believe she would be raising a beautiful 3-year-old child, the baby. The investigators had confirmed Kelsie's pregnancy through medical records and the evidence found in her car. What started as one missing person had become 2, mother and child, both vanished into the Colorado winter. Detective Sokolsky attended the vigil, as he had every year. He stood at the edge of the crowd, watching faces and listening to conversations. Sometimes, memorial services brought forward new witnesses, people whose guilt finally outweighed their fear. Tonight, he noticed a young woman he hadn't seen before, mid-20s, nervous, repeatedly glancing toward the parking lot as if ready to run. During the closing prayer, she approached him. "I think I might know something," she whispered. "About Donthe Lucas. About what he said after Kelsie disappeared." Sokolski's pulse quickened, but his voice remained calm. "Would you be willing to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement?" She nodded quickly and disappeared into the crowd before he could get her name. Hope flickered like the memorial candles, small but persistent, refusing to be extinguished. The Dateline NBC crew arrived in Pueblo on a Tuesday, their satellite truck and professional cameras drawing curious stares from passers-by. True Crime Television had discovered Kelsie Schelling's story, and Laura Saxton had agreed to tell it to a national audience. Keith Morrison's distinctive voice would soon carry Kelsie's story into millions of American living rooms. The show's producers had spent weeks researching the case, interviewing investigators, and gathering footage that would transform a local tragedy into primetime entertainment. But for Laura, it wasn't entertainment, it was hope. "Every time Kelsie's story gets told, someone new hears it," she explained to the camera. "Someone who might have seen something, might know something, might finally decide to speak up." The television exposure brought results. The tip line logged dozens of calls in the days following the broadcast. Most led nowhere, well-meaning viewers reporting sightings of young women who resembled Kelsie, conspiracy theories about human trafficking, and the usual collection of psychics claiming supernatural insight. But buried among the false leads was information that mattered. A former co-worker of Donthe Lucas called to report conversations she remembered from 2013. "He used to talk about getting rid of problems," she told Detective Sokolski. "He said some people just disappear and nobody asks questions." A bartender from a South Pueblo dive bar recalled serving Lucas in the days after Kelsie vanished. "He was throwing money around like he'd hit the lottery, buying drinks for everyone, acting like he was celebrating something." Each tip was investigated, cataloged, and added to the growing file. Somewhere in the accumulating evidence, prosecutors were building a case that might finally bring justice. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation had quietly taken over the investigation from local police, bringing fresh eyes and expanded resources to bear on the cold case. Agent Kevin Torres had worked dozens of homicides, but something about Kelsie's story haunted him. Maybe it was the pregnancy. Maybe it was Laura Saxton's unwavering determination. Or maybe it was the certainty that somewhere in Pueblo, a killer was walking free while a young mother and her child lay hidden in an unmarked grave. The arrest warrant was signed on the 1st of December 2017, 4 years, 9 months, and 27 days after Kelsie Schelling disappeared. It charged Donthe Lucas with first-degree murder not just of Kelsie, but of her unborn child as well. The evidence had accumulated slowly, piece by piece, like a mosaic revealing its picture only when viewed from a distance. No single piece was overwhelming, but together they painted a clear portrait of guilt. Digital forensics had recovered deleted text messages between Kelsie and Lucas, revealing his panic when she told him about the pregnancy. "This can't happen right now," he had written. "This ruins everything." Surveillance footage from multiple locations tracked their movements on February 4th, together at the hospital, together leaving for Walmart, Lucas alone afterward using Kelsie's ATM card. Witnesses had come forward with stories of Lucas's behavior in the days following Kelsie's disappearance, his lack of concern, his conflicting explanations, his sudden access to money he couldn't account for. And there was the life insurance policy. Lucas had taken out a $400,000 policy on Kelsie just 6 weeks before she vanished, naming himself as the beneficiary. Agent Torres led the arrest team to Lucas's apartment at dawn. They had learned from experience that early morning raids caught suspects off guard before they could destroy evidence or flee. The element of surprise was crucial when arresting someone who had evaded justice for nearly 5 years. Lucas answered the door in boxer shorts and a wrinkled t-shirt, squinting against the morning light. He showed no surprise when Torres identified himself and read the charges. No shock, no protests of innocence, no demands to know what this was about. Just resignation, as if he had been expecting this moment for years. "Am I going to need a lawyer?" Lucas asked, as the handcuffs clicked shut. "That would probably be a good idea," Torres replied. The mugshot photo flashed across news channels within hours. Donthe Lucas, 28, charged with murder in the Kelsie Schelling case. After 4 years of silence, the wheels of justice were finally turning. But justice delayed is not justice denied, and Lucas's legal team was already planning their defense. The courtroom became Laura Saxton's second home over the next 3 years. Motion hearings, plea negotiations, discovery disputes, and endless delays stretched the pretrial process into a marathon of legal maneuvering. Lucas's defense team, led by attorney Jessica Walsh, filed motion after motion challenging the evidence. They argued that surveillance footage was too grainy to definitively identify their client. They claimed that text messages had been taken out of context. They demanded that charges be dismissed due to the lack of a body. The prosecution wants you to convict Mr. Lucas based on speculation and circumstantial evidence, Walsh argued during one hearing. In America, we don't send people to prison for life based on what might have happened. District Attorney Dan May pushed back against every delay. His prosecution team had spent years building this case, and they were confident in their evidence. But confidence didn't speed up the legal process. Justice delayed is justice denied, May told reporters after another postponement. The Schelling family has waited long enough for answers. The delays took their toll on everyone involved. Laura Saxton aged visibly during the pre-trial period, her hair turning gray as she attended hearing after hearing where nothing seemed to get resolved. She had taken a leave of absence from her job to focus on the case, living off savings and the kindness of friends who understood her mission. Detective Sokulski, now promoted to sergeant, watched younger officers take over active cases while he remained tied to this one from 2013. The case had defined his career, consumed thousands of hours, and tested his faith in the system he served. And somewhere, Kelsie Schelling remained missing. Every delay meant another day her family couldn't lay her to rest. Another day her killer remained free on bail. Another day justice waited. The trial was finally scheduled for March 2020. Then the world stopped. COVID-19 shut down courtrooms across Colorado, adding months to a case that had already stretched across 7 years. The virus that killed hundreds of thousands also delayed justice for one young woman and her unborn child. The world had changed by the time Lucas's trial date arrived. Face masks were mandatory in the courthouse. Social distancing reduced the number of spectators allowed in. The gallery, hand sanitizer stations stood guard at every entrance. But Laura Saxton was there, mask covering half her face but eyes still burning with the determination that had sustained her through 8 years of waiting. She had reserved a seat in the front row for every day of trial, no matter how long it took. The jury selection process revealed how thoroughly Kelsie's story had penetrated the community consciousness. Nearly every potential juror had heard of the case through news coverage or social media. Some had participated in search efforts. Others had seen the billboards that still dotted Colorado highways. Judge William Chappell worked methodically through the challenges, seeking 12 citizens who could judge the evidence without prejudice. It took 3 days to seat a jury, 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 22 to 67. Finally, on the 8th of March 2021, the trial began. Prosecutor Michelle Costner stood before the jury with the confidence of someone who had spent 4 years preparing for this moment. Her opening statement laid out the prosecution's theory with surgical precision. On the 4th of February 2013, Kelsie Schelling drove to Pueblo to tell her boyfriend she was pregnant. She thought she was sharing good news. Instead, she was signing her death warrant. Costner walked the jury through the evidence, the surveillance footage, the cell phone records, the financial transactions, the witness testimony. Each piece by itself might seem small, but together they formed an unbreakable chain of guilt. Donthe Lucas killed Kelsie Schelling because she threatened his freedom. He killed her unborn child because that baby represented responsibility he didn't want. And then he hid their bodies and lied about it for 8 years. The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of Laura Saxton crying. The truth, finally, was being told. Defense attorney Jessica Walsh faced an impossible task, and she knew it. The evidence against her client was overwhelming, circumstantial but comprehensive. Her only hope was to create reasonable doubt in the minds of at least one juror. The prosecution wants you to convict Mr. Lucas of murder, but they can't prove anyone is dead, Walsh told the jury during her opening statement. They can't show you a body. They can't show you a crime scene. They can't even prove that a crime occurred. She acknowledged that Kelsie Schelling was missing, probably dead, but missing didn't equal murdered, and murdered didn't equal murdered by her client. Kelsie Schelling was an adult woman who had every right to disappear if she chose to. She was facing an unplanned pregnancy, a complicated relationship, and pressure from her family. Maybe she decided to start over somewhere new. It was a desperate argument, and Walsh knew it. The evidence contradicted every word, but she had to give the jury an alternative theory. Without a body, without DNA evidence, without eyewitness testimony to the actual killing, there was still room for doubt. The prosecution's witnesses painted a devastating picture of Lucas's behavior after Kelsie's disappearance. Former friends testified about his lack of concern for his missing girlfriend. Bank employees identified him using Kelsie's ATM card hours after she vanished. Surveillance experts walked the jury through footage, showing Lucas's lies in real time. But Walsh chipped away at each witness. She highlighted inconsistencies in their memories, She questioned the quality of surveillance footage. She suggested that Lucas might have been trying to protect Kelsie by withdrawing her money and bringing it to her wherever she was hiding. The jury listened to it all with the gravity of citizens performing their most important civic duty. They took notes, studied evidence photos, and watched surveillance footage until they could recite the timeline from memory. Somewhere in that evidence lay the truth about what happened to Kelsie Schelling and her unborn child. Deliberations lasted 2 days, 47 hours and 36 minutes of 12 citizens reviewing evidence, debating testimony, and wrestling with the weight of their decision. They sent notes to the judge asking for clarification on legal definitions. They requested to see certain pieces of evidence again. Outside the courthouse, media vans lined the street. Reporters broadcast live updates to audiences across the country. The case had captured national attention: a young woman, a pregnancy, a years-long quest for justice. Laura Saxton waited in the victim services room, surrounded by family members and advocates who had supported her through 8 years of uncertainty. She couldn't eat, couldn't sit still, couldn't think about anything except the 12 strangers deciding her daughter's fate. At 3:47 p.m. on the 12th of March 2021, the jury sent word that they had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly. Laura took her seat in the front row, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Behind her, Detective Sokolsky and Agent Torres sat with the prosecution team. Across the aisle, Donthe Lucas sat beside his attorneys, his face unreadable. Judge Chappell entered and took his place on the bench. The jury filed in, their faces revealing nothing about the decision they had reached. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" the judge asked. The foreman, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, stood up. "We have, Your Honor. Please read the verdict." The foreman unfolded a piece of paper and cleared his throat. The courtroom held its breath. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Donthe Lucas, guilty of murder in the first degree." Laura Saxton collapsed into her sister's arms. 8 years of grief and hope and determination, finally finding release in that single word: guilty. Behind her, reporters frantically typed updates. Cameras captured every moment of vindication and heartbreak. Justice, delayed but not denied, had finally arrived. But Kelsie Schelling was still missing. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later, giving both sides time to prepare their final arguments about Donthe Lucas's fate. In Colorado, first-degree murder carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the judge would hear victim impact statements first, an opportunity for Kelsie's family to address the man who had destroyed their lives. Laura Saxton had been preparing her statement for 8 years. Every sleepless night, every unanswered prayer, every birthday and holiday celebrated without Kelsie had contributed to the words she would speak in court. On the 2nd of April 2021, she stood at the podium in Judge Chappell's courtroom and faced her daughter's killer. "You took everything from us," she began, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You took Kelsie. You took her baby. You took our peace, our security, our belief that people are basically good." Lucas sat at the defense table, staring at his hands. He had maintained his innocence throughout the trial, but the jury had seen through his lies. Now, facing life in prison, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished. "But you didn't take our love for Kelsie," Laura continued. "You didn't take our memories. And you didn't take our determination to find her and bring her home." Other family members spoke about the woman Kelsie had been: kind, generous, excited about becoming a mother. They spoke about the child who would never be born, the grandchild who would never blow out birthday candles or take first steps. When the family finished, Judge Chappell addressed Lucas directly. "Do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Lucas stood slowly, consulting with his attorney one final time. The courtroom waited for words of remorse, confession, or at least acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Instead, he simply said, "No, Your Honor." Judge Chappell's voice carried the weight of finality. "Donthe Lucas, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel fell with the sound of justice served. 8 years, 1 month, and 28 days after Kelsie Schelling disappeared, her killer was finally behind bars. But for Laura Saxton and her family, the victory felt incomplete. Donthe Lucas would spend the rest of his life in the Colorado State Penitentiary, but he had taken the secret of Kelsie's location to his cell. Without her cooperation, investigators had no way to find her remains. The days following the sentencing brought an outpouring of support from around the world. Letters and emails flooded the Pueblo Police Department, expressing sympathy for the family and admiration for their persistence. Many came from other families dealing with missing loved ones, seeking hope from Laura's example. A candlelight vigil in Sunset Park drew nearly 200 people, The same spot where volunteers had gathered for those first desperate searches now hosted a celebration of justice and remembrance of life. Local musicians performed songs about hope and healing. Children who had been toddlers when Kelsie disappeared now stood as teenagers, holding candles and listening to stories about a young woman they had never met but would never forget. The mayor of Pueblo presented Laura with a key to the city, recognizing her years of advocacy and her role in bringing a killer to justice. "You never gave up," he said. "You showed all of us what love looks like when it refuses to surrender." But in quiet moments, away from the cameras and congratulations, Laura still felt the enormous weight of incompleteness. Justice had been served, but closure required something more. "I need to find her," she told Detective Sokolsky during a private meeting after the sentencing. "I need to bring her home so she can finally rest in peace." Sokolsky nodded. The case was officially closed from a legal standpoint, but the search for Kelsie would continue. It would always continue until she was found. Somewhere in Colorado, a mother and child waited to be discovered. Their story was finished, but their journey home had just begun. Lucas's appellate lawyers filed their first motion 6 months after his sentencing, arguing that the conviction should be overturned due to insufficient evidence. It was expected all defendants in murder cases appealed their convictions, especially when sentenced to life without parole. The appeal process would take years, grinding through the Colorado Court of Appeals and potentially the state Supreme Court. Each motion, each brief, each hearing represented another delay in the finality that Laura Saxton craved, but she had learned patience during 8 years of waiting for trial. She could wait longer if necessary. The appeals centered on the defense's familiar argument: without a body, without physical evidence of a murder, how could the state prove beyond reasonable doubt that a crime had occurred? The appellate attorneys pointed to cases where missing persons had been found alive years after being declared dead. Prosecutor Dan May's office filed their response with methodical precision. The evidence against Lucas had been overwhelming: surveillance footage, financial records, witness testimony, and the defendant's own contradictory statements. The jury had weighed all of it and reached the only reasonable conclusion. Judge Patricia Herron reviewed the case file, which had grown to over 3,000 pages of documents, transcripts, and evidence photos. She studied the surveillance footage, read witness statements, and examined the legal precedents cited by both sides. The hearing lasted less than an hour. Judge Herron's decision was swift and decisive. The evidence presented at trial was more than sufficient to support the jury's verdict, she ruled. The defendant's conviction and sentence are affirmed. Lucas would remain in prison for life. His next appeal would go to the Colorado Supreme Court, but legal experts considered his chances minimal. The conviction was solid, the evidence overwhelming, the legal process properly followed. Outside the courthouse, Laura Saxton spoke to a small group of reporters. Donthe Lucas was given a fair trial and convicted by a jury of his peers, she said. Now it's time for him to do the right thing and tell us where he put Kelsie. The appeal was denied, but the search continued. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October 2022, addressed to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation in careful handwriting. Inside, an inmate from another state claimed to have information about Kelsie Schelling's location. Agent Torres read the letter with skeptical interest. Prison inmates frequently wrote to law enforcement agencies, claiming knowledge about unsolved cases. Most were seeking attention, special treatment, or transfer to different facilities. But every letter had to be investigated. This one was different. The inmate provided details about Lucas that hadn't been released to the public, specific conversations, names of mutual acquaintances, references to events that occurred during his time in jail awaiting trial. Either this person had real connections to Lucas, or he had access to information that shouldn't have been available. The letter claimed that Lucas had confessed to another inmate during his pre-trial detention, describing how he had killed Kelsie and hidden her body in a remote area south of Pueblo. The location was specific: an abandoned oil drilling site off Highway 165, near a distinctive rock formation. Torres drove to the location on a crisp autumn morning, accompanied by a search team and specialist dogs trained to detect human remains. The landscape was desolate, rolling hills covered with brown grass, scattered with the rusted equipment of failed industrial ventures. They searched for 3 days, covering a 2-square-mile area around the coordinates provided by the inmate. The dogs alerted to several spots where they detected the scent of decomposition, but excavation revealed only the remains of animals that had died of natural causes. The letter, like dozens before it, led to another dead end, but Torres filed it with the others, adding to the collection of false leads and sincere attempts to help. Somewhere in the accumulating tips and theories might be the clue that finally brought Kelsie home. The search continued, one false hope at a time. Detective Sokolsky, now nearing retirement, stood in his office looking at the wall map of Pueblo County. Red pins marked every location that had been searched over the past 9 years. The map looked like it had been attacked by tiny arrows, hundreds of pins covering fields, riverbeds, abandoned buildings, and remote canyons. Each pin represented hope followed by disappointment. Each one meant another family member who had to be called with the news that today's search had found nothing. New technology offered new possibilities. Ground-penetrating radar could detect buried objects without excavation. Drone-mounted cameras could survey vast areas in hours instead of days. Satellite imagery could identify changes in vegetation that might indicate buried remains. But Colorado was a big state, and without better information about where to look, even the most sophisticated technology felt inadequate. The reward money had grown to $100,000, funded by donations from across the country. People who had never met Kelsie Schelling contributed to the fund, moved by her story and her family's determination. The money had generated new tips, but none had led to discovery. Laura Saxton continued her advocacy work, speaking at conferences about missing persons and supporting other families dealing with similar tragedies. She had become an expert on victims' rights, search techniques, and the legal system's treatment of families. Her pain had been transformed into purpose, but late at night, in the quiet moments before sleep, she still prayed for the phone call that would change everything. The call that would begin with the words she had been waiting 9 years to hear. We found her. The searches continued. The hope endured. And somewhere in Colorado, Kelsie waited to be brought home. The conference room at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children buzzed with quiet conversation as families gathered for the annual meeting. Representatives from 43 states had come to Washington, D.C. to share resources, compare strategies, and find strength in their shared mission. Laura Saxton's presentation drew the largest audience of the week. Her story had become legendary in the missing persons community. 8 years of searching, fighting, and refusing to give up until justice was served. Other families looked to her as proof that answers were possible, that killers could be caught, that the system sometimes worked. But her message was more complex than simple encouragement. Getting a conviction doesn't end the pain, she told the audience. It's a necessary step, but it's not the finish line. Donthe Lucas will die in prison, and I'm glad about that. But my daughter is still missing. My granddaughter or grandson is still missing. Until I can visit their graves and leave flowers, the fight continues. The audience included parents whose children had vanished decades ago, siblings still searching for missing brothers and sisters, and adult children whose parents had disappeared without explanation. Each family carried their own burden of uncertainty, their own collection of false leads and broken promises. A woman from Montana approached Laura after the presentation. Her 23-year-old son had disappeared while hiking in Glacier National Park 7 years earlier. Despite extensive searches, no trace had ever been found. How do you keep going? She asked. How do you get up every morning and face another day of not knowing? Laura took her hands. You do it because love doesn't stop when someone disappears. You do it because they deserve to be looked for. And you do it because sometimes, not often, but sometimes, missing people get found. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. I just want to bring him home. I know, Laura whispered. We all do. The convention ended with a candlelight ceremony in honor of all the missing. Kelsie's bedroom remained exactly as she had left it 9 years earlier. The bed was made with the same lavender comforter she had chosen in high school. Textbooks from her college courses sat stacked on the desk. The framed photo of her high school graduation still smiled from the nightstand. Laura dusted the room every week, changed the sheets monthly, and kept fresh flowers on the windowsill. Some people thought it was unhealthy, this shrine to a daughter who would never come home. But for Laura, it was a promise. When Kelsie was found, when she was finally brought home, her room would be waiting. The photo albums came out on holidays and birthdays. Laura would sit on Kelsie's bed and turn the pages slowly, remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings, first days of school and family vacations. Each picture was a story, each story a celebration of a life that had been cut too short. Her sister worried about her. You're living in the past, she would say gently. Kelsie wouldn't want you to stop living your own life. But Laura wasn't living in the past. She was maintaining hope for the future day when Kelsie would be found, when the family could finally grieve properly, when closure would be possible. She had started a foundation in Kelsie's name, providing support for other families of missing persons. The work gave her purpose beyond her own pain, a way to transform tragedy into help for others facing similar ordeals. The foundation funded search efforts, provided counseling for families, and advocated for better laws to protect missing persons. In 3 years, they had helped locate 12 missing individuals and provided support to hundreds of families. Kelsie always wanted to help people, Laura told donors and volunteers. This foundation is her legacy, her way of continuing to make a difference even though she's gone. The work couldn't fill the hole in her heart, but it honored her daughter's memory and gave meaning to the years of suffering. Pueblo had changed in the decades since Kelsie Schelling's disappearance, but her memory remained woven into the fabric of the community. A mural on the side of the downtown library depicted her smiling face surrounded by sunflowers, with the words "Never Forgotten" painted in gold letters below. High school students learning about the case in criminal justice classes often asked their teachers why Kelsie's body had never been found. The question haunted their parents too. How could someone disappear so completely in a world full of surveillance cameras and digital footprints? The annual memorial run drew participants from across Colorado. Runners wore T-shirts with Kelsie's picture and raised money for the foundation that bore her name. The 5-kilometer route started at Sunset Park, where volunteers had gathered for those first desperate searches, and ended at the courthouse where her killer had finally been convicted. Local businesses displayed missing person posters in their windows, not just for Kelsie, but for others who had vanished in Colorado over the years. The posters created a gallery of the lost young and old, men and women, all sharing the common fate of mysterious disappearance. The impact extended beyond missing persons cases. Police departments across the state had upgraded their surveillance systems and improved coordination with other agencies. Kelsie's case had exposed gaps in the system that allowed crucial evidence to be missed and suspects to escape justice for years. Defense attorneys now had to contend with juries who understood that circumstantial evidence could be overwhelming even without a body. Prosecutors had learned to build murder cases on digital breadcrumbs and surveillance footage, knowing that modern technology left few crimes truly without evidence. But the most lasting change was harder to measure. Parents held their adult children a little tighter. Young women were more cautious about traveling alone to meet boyfriends. And everyone understood that evil could hide behind familiar faces, that trust could be fatal, that some secrets never stayed buried forever. 10 years, a decade of searching, hoping, waiting, and wondering. On the 4th of February 2023, Laura Saxton stood at the same podium where she had first begged for help finding her daughter. The press conference was smaller this time, fewer reporters, less national attention. Missing person cases faded from headlines as newer tragedies captured public interest. But for families like the Saxtons, time never diminished the urgency of their need for answers. 10 years ago, Kelsie drove to Pueblo to share the most important news of her life, Laura began. She was going to be a mother. Instead, she became a victim. Today, I'm asking anyone who has information about where Donthe Lucas put my daughter and grandchild to please come forward. The reward had grown to $150,000, but money hadn't been enough to unlock the secret that Lucas had carried to his prison cell. He maintained his innocence, refused to cooperate with investigators, and showed no remorse for the crime that had destroyed multiple families. New leads still came in occasionally, tips from psychics claiming supernatural insights, theories from amateur detectives who had studied the case online, and the occasional credible report from someone who thought they might have seen something relevant years earlier. Each tip was investigated with the same thoroughness as the first. Phone calls were made, locations were searched, and families were disappointed once again when hope led to another dead end. But Laura's voice remained strong as she concluded the press conference with the same words she had spoken for 10 years. Someone knows where Kelsie Island. Someone knows what happened to her and her baby. Please help us bring them home. The cameras rolled, the reporters asked their questions, and another anniversary passed without resolution. The search would continue tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day until Kelsie Schelling came home.